Welcome to this kind of first edition of Aeterni Patris. It's had a few different names, but I've settled on Aeterni Patris as the name of this. And Aeterni Patris, of course, is the encyclical from 1879 written by Pope Leo XIII, one of my favorite popes. And we are carrying out what he wrote in that encyclical about the restoration of Christian philosophy according to the mind of St. Thomas Aquinas. That was the subtitle of the encyclical. And in it, he warned against errant philosophers. Now, of course, that many have come since him that he didn't know about, but there were a lot of them in the 19th century to be concerned about, and this is why he wrote it. He saw the warning signs, he saw trouble brewing, and if he was here today, I think he would say, wow, we're really seeing this all play out, the effect of bad philosophy. And so we started with William of Ockham, who lived 1285 to 1347. And then we went into John Wycliffe, who was basically 14th century, lived in the 1300s. And then the last one was Erasmus, and he died in 1536. So by the time Erasmus died, the Protestant Reformation is in full swing. And now we are going to study Niccolò Machiavelli. You've probably heard of him, and the dates of his life obviously are very important. It's interesting, as I mentioned in a previous video, how the 15th century was really quiet. Okay, 1400s. Of course, Machiavelli lived in the 1400s for about 31 years, but there wasn't a whole lot that was put out. I mean, he was probably writing by then, but a lot of the troubles, so to speak, started in the 16th century, and that's of course when the Protestant Reformation comes, and we're going to get to Luther as well. This guy, Machiavelli, definitely contributed to a lot of the trouble that we see today, and of course he would have been aware of Erasmus, and he would have been aware of Wycliffe, and certainly Aquinas, and largely rejected Aquinas and Aristotelian philosophy, as we'll see here in a moment. Okay, so all right, so let's go and talk about Niccolò Machiavelli, typically just called Machiavelli, Italian Renaissance diplomat, philosopher, and author. His most famous book is called The Prince, which interestingly really didn't, from what I understand, didn't come out and be popular until after his death. He's called the father of modern political philosophy and political science for reasons that we'll explain here in a moment. And Machiavelli's name came to evoke unscrupulous politicians of the sort Machiavelli advised most famously in the book The Prince. He considered political battles not through the lens of morality, but as though they were a board game with established rules. His experience showed him that politics have always been played with deception, treachery, and crime. What you'll see with Machiavelli is that he definitely played by the adage that the means justify the end. Whatever you need to do to accomplish the end that you want is going to be okay. In fact, you can be forgiven for, I don't know if he cared about God's forgiveness, but certainly by people. And he was Catholic. And he wasn't a priest, but he was Catholic. In fact, I think he received last rites when he died. Of course, in this time in Italy, pretty much everybody's Catholic. The Protestant Reformation was just beginning to brew as he died. He also said that a ruler who is establishing a kingdom or a republic and is criticized for his deeds, including violence, should be excused when the intention and the result is beneficial. Now we're going to see, if you're watching my other videos, as we get into moral theology with St. Thomas Aquinas, that the means can't justify the ends, and for an act to be good, the intention has to be good, and the end has to be good, and the circumstances. So there's a lot that has to go into a good act. Machiavelli seemed to kind of throw out some of these and say, well, if you it's like if I have well-behaved children, but they got that way because I beat them and I locked them, did really harsh draconian measures. Well, that's not right, because the means were not justified. It's like quelling a riot. You can't just start shooting everybody, because that's unjust, right? Or in the case of protesters, I guess you should say. All right, Machiavelli was born in a tumultuous era. Now this is very important, because we're all kind of formed by our circumstances. and he certainly was, in which popes waged acquisitive wars against Italian city-states, and people in cities often fell from power as France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire battled for regional influence and control. Political military alliances continually changed, featuring mercenary leaders who changed sides without warning, and the rise and fall of many short-lived governments. Okay, so we can't excuse this point that Machiavelli lived in a time when even the church was really, really involved in politics and negotiations. I guess you could probably say it always has been to some degree, but I think it was more overt at this time. And so he's beginning to see that even the Vicar of Christ is involved in some of these dealings, and he's thinking, okay, whatever, we got to be very pragmatic about this. From 1502 to 1503, he witnessed the brutal reality of the state-building methods of Caesar Borgia and his father, Pope Alexander VI. Now, Pope Alexander VI, I don't know a lot about him, but he's generally considered to be one of the worst popes of all time, who were then engaged in the process of trying to bring a large part of central Italy under their possession. Okay, so you can kind of excuse Machiavelli a little bit because of the times that he lived, but then again, we understand that ideas have consequences, and the ideas that he wrote about and proposed and espoused to this day, as we'll see, have big influence. He believed that public and private morality had to be understood as two different things in order to rule well. As a result, a ruler must be concerned not only with reputation, but also must be positively willing to act unscrupulously at the right times. Machiavelli believed as a ruler it was better to be widely feared than to be greatly loved. That's one of the most common things known about Machiavelli, is that he said, as I just said, it's a ruler should rather be feared than loved. You know, that you can get better results. Again, all he's concerned about is the end. And this will play into utilitarianism that we will learn about in future philosophers, where basically you can see it played out today, where an old person is no longer productive and a productive member of society and is suffering, and so we need, some people would say, well, that person needs to be put to death because it would be better for the culture, so to put them out of their misery, right? So you see utilitarianism played out quite a bit in our culture today. A loved ruler retains authority by obligation, while a feared ruler rules by fear of punishment, he said. All right, due to the treatise's controversial analysis on politics, the Catholic Church banned The Prince, putting it on the basically forbidden to read list. Humanists also viewed the book negatively, including Erasmus, who we learned about in the last video. Remember, Erasmus was kind of on the fence, and 1 foot as a loyal churchman and 1 foot kind of in Luther's camp, and he didn't seem to quite take one side or the other. As a treatise, its primary intellectual contribution to the history of political thought is the fundamental break between political realism and political idealism, due to its being a manual on acquiring and keeping political power. We see that played out today, where there seems to be some political leaders that want to put God in the equation, and some people, like Marxism, communism, does not by its very nature have God as its goal. So this would be more idealism in the mind of somebody like Machiavelli, where you're making up this God, and really to him all that really matters would be the here and now, and the temporal rule and the temporal results. And again, you'll see in the last slide that he did impact communism. All right, he insisted that an imaginary ideal society is not a model by which a prince should orient himself. All right, so there you go. His other famous work was Discourses in Livy. Machiavelli has noted that to save a republic from corruption, it is necessary to return to a kingly state using violent means. And you'll see that he influenced a lot of future philosophers. Commentators such as Leo Strauss have gone so far as to name Machiavelli as the deliberate originator of modernity itself. Pope Pius X is going to write an encyclical condemning modernity. And so you see where this can be a problem. Now this is important, because this has to do even about Thomas Aquinas. Aquinas is mentioned here. The Socratic school of classical political philosophy, especially Aristotle, had become a major influence on European political thinking in the late Middle Ages. It existed both in the Catholicized form presented by Thomas Aquinas, who all these series that I'm doing is based on, and in a more controversial Averist Averroist form of authors like Parsilius of Padua. Machiavelli was critical of the Catholic political thinking and may have been influenced by Averroism, but he rarely cites Plato and Aristotle and most likely did not approve of them. That says Wikipedia, obviously. I'm taking this information from Wikipedia, and where there is a citation, I'm putting it to give credit to the people who whose information I'm leaning on for this. And so here you go. We talk about the breakup of Thomistic philosophy and the order that he had established. Machiavelli was not a Thomist. Okay, Machiavelli would have thought of Aquinas as more of an idealist, with something future as our goal, and the means cannot justify the ends, and so he would not have fallen into that camp. The major difference between Machiavelli and the Socratics, including, according to Strauss, is Machiavelli's materialism. All right. This is a thing that we see very prevalent in our culture today, and therefore his rejection of both a teleological view of nature and the view that philosophy is higher than politics. With their teleological understanding of things, Socratics argued that desirable things tend to happen by nature, as if nature desired them, but Machiavelli claimed that such things happen by blind chance or human action. All right, here you go. The fifth proof for the existence of God, according to Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, is the governance of the world, sometimes called the governance of an intellectual designer, where things don't just happen by chance. There is somebody who's calling the shots, so to speak, and so we see processes like photosynthesis or ducks flying south for the winter, and Machiavelli would say, well, that's just blind chance, and teleologists would say, no, that's designed. There's a design in nature. So here's a huge break. This is a big deal. Machiavelli is sometimes seen as the prototype of modern empirical scientist. Okay, we're going to have positivists like Auguste Comte come out and say he won't believe anything other than that which can be empirically proven, building generalizations from experience and historical facts and emphasizing the uselessness of theorizing with the imagination. Okay, so you see a big problem here. Joshua Kaplan in 2005 said he emancipated politics from theology and moral philosophy. He undertook to describe simply what rulers actually did, and thus anticipated what was later called the scientific spirit, in which questions of good and bad were ignored, and the observer attempts to discover only what really happens. All right, so this speaks for itself. Okay, this is trouble, and we see this played out 500 years later in today's culture, right? And he died almost 500 years ago exactly, and ideas brew and they marinate in a culture, and then they come out in full swing. Machiavelli is generally seen as being critical of Christianity as it existed in his time, specifically its effect upon politics and also everyday life. In his opinion, Christianity, along with teleological or Aristotelianism, that is so important. Okay, teleological. In my other series that I'm doing on the Summa, go back and watch the video. I have one that says a word that you have to understand to get the Summa and its epistemology. The very next video is, here's another word that you have to understand to get the Summa, and it's teleology. And a third word that you have to understand to get the Summa would be nature. You have to understand nature, operation, the way things are designed. But anyways, I'm getting off track here. The church had come to accept allowed practical decisions to be guided too much by imaginary ideals and encouraged people to lazily leave events up to providence, or as he would put it, chance, luck, or fortune. Okay, I've already made my point. He shows repeatedly that he saw religion as man-made and that the values of religion lie in its contribution to social order, and the rules of morality must be dispensed with if security requires it. This guy is trouble. Now look at this. The importance of Machiavelli's influence is notable in many important figures in this endeavor. Bodine, Bacon, Sidney, Harrington, Milton, Spinoza, Rousseau. He was not always mentioned by name as an inspiration due to his controversy. He is also thought to have been an influence on major philosophers such as Montaigne, Descartes, basically, who in the next century is going to unleash I think therefore I am, and he's sometimes called the father of modern philosophy. Hobbes, Locke, Montesquieu. Okay, so again, Okay, so here we go. As far as communism, the 20th century Italian communist Antonio Gramsci drew great inspiration from Machiavelli's writings on ethics, morals, and how they relate to the state and revolution, in his writings on passive revolution and how a society can be manipulated by controlling popular notions of morality. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like what's happening in our culture today? Josef Stalin read The Prince and annotated his own copy. Okay, I don't know. Obviously, the whole point here is Leo the 13th in Aeterni Patris said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! We got to tap the brakes. We got to get back to Thomistic philosophy because these bad philosophers have torn it to pieces." And here is a philosopher that lived about, almost 300 years after Aquinas. Thomas was in the 13th century. He died in the 16th. But Thomistic philosophy is taking hits now, and it's only going to get worse because people are influenced by philosophers. We need to get back to Thomistic philosophy, scholasticism. It's happening in some schools right now, but it needs to happen faster because people's minds are getting polluted by bad philosophy, and we have to go back and, like when you take out a tree, you don't just rip it, you have to get to the roots, and these are the roots of the problem. Okay, the next one we'll be doing will come up in a couple of days. Thank you for watching. This is now officially Aeterni Patris. Please share it, please comment, let me know what you think, and I thank you for watching. God bless you.